And hello and welcome to the last webinar in the Demystifying IRT's admissions process webinar series. Today, we are just going to reiterate some of the information from the last five webinars and talk about the final step of submitting an application and ask any questions that you all may still have about the application itself or IRT and the program generally, or graduate school more broadly, and whatever else might be useful. As I've said previously, my name is Brittany Zorn. I am the Arts and Sciences Program Specialist here with the Institute for Recruitment of Teachers. I'm a proud IRT alumna from the 2013 cohort, and I am going in my 6th year as a staff person with IRT. So, an overview of today's conversation, a really short presentation, the shortest one that we've had yet. So we're going to revisit the application evaluation criteria from the first webinar. We're going to talk about some general advice and take some golden nuggets from all 5 webinars that we've already mentioned. We're going to look at the application tabs again and remember all the components of the application. We'll talk about the steps to submit, and then what next steps for you all, like what to be thinking about and working on now, and looking at the admissions notification timeline. And then we'll conclude with where to find additional information. Okay, so folks may remember from the first webinar, if you watched it or participated, that the IRT evaluates its applicants across 5 categories. And those 5 categories are listed here on the left-hand side. So that is your overall fit with the IRT mission, your academic background, which we consider to be your resume or CV, your transcripts, your previous coursework, and your professional experience. Also, we dive deep into the academic background in webinar 4 or 3, I'm forgetting right off the top of my head, but you can go to the IRT YouTube channel and search for this series and you would find a deep dive into that. The third category is letters of recommendation, although we do not accept, is the word I'm looking for, formal letters of recommendation. We actually have a particular form that we've created that asks recommenders some targeted questions. It includes 10 Likert scale questions, which is the strongly disagree to strongly agree scale, and then 5 short answer questions that really get at the things that we care about for applicants, which is commitment to serving diverse students and or addressing issues of diversity, equity, and access in education, fit and preparedness for intended graduate school program. So, do you have the necessary prerequisites, foundations, and skills for the field and career that you're pursuing? And general skills for graduate study like persistence, time management, stress management, and a general passion for scholarship and work. And then the 4th category is your essays, the application essays, which we discussed. That one was number 4. So academic background was number 3, I'm pretty sure. Essays were number 4, and the interview was number 5 in terms of the webinar series. And then the 5th evaluation category being the interview. We evaluate students in these 5 categories on a scale of 1 to 5, which you can see on the right-hand side, 5 being excellent, 4 being above average, 3 being average, 2 being below average, and 1 being poor. For anyone who's looking at this and thinking that they need to work really hard to submit a 5, a 5, 5, 5, 5, 5 application, an application where you get 5s in all these categories, that's not actually typical of IRT applicants. As we've discussed in previous webinars, what we normally see is somewhere in the average to above average range for IRT applicants in all of these 5 categories on the left-hand side. So we truly mean average levels of preparedness, average performance, as in acceptable, not average as in actually meaning, below average or poor, average meaning just this is what we would anticipate from the kinds of students that we work with. So the majority of IRT applications and the students we work with score somewhere between a 5 and a 3, rather, somewhere in that range, not all 5s. Okay. So general advice for applicants to be successful, we really do prioritize that IRT mission fit, that piece I was just describing. So applicants who demonstrate an understanding of social justice issues in education and a commitment to addressing issues of diversity, equity, access, and inclusion through their work or their scholarship. we're very mission driven, heart forward people and organizations. So we prioritize that probably above anything else. You can have a slightly low GPA. You can have like maybe only a few, or very minimal research experience. You might need some more coursework or some more professional experience to be like truly an exceptional applicant. But if you care, if you're passionate, if you've demonstrated tenacity and commitment to this work, and you really want to get this degree, then that is really compelling to us, and we want to work with you. We encourage folks to ask recommenders to submit early, or ask recommenders early if they would serve as recommenders for your application. There will be no extensions to the March 1st deadline for the IRT application. So you really want to make sure that your recommenders are able to submit in advance of March 1st, maybe even giving them an earlier deadline like April 15th or April 20th, even April 25th, so that if there is any slacking or last minute scrambling, you have a few days grace period to like work that out with your recommenders. You want to give yourself time to proofread and look over your application a second time after like a day or two off. So you ideally don't want to be working on your application up till 11:59 on on February 28th, and like hitting submit just a few minutes before midnight on the 1st. You truly want to be able to like take a day off and then review your application with fresh eyes at least once before you turn it in order to like maximize the quality of your application. And just as I said, we really try to be firm with the March 1st deadline. Of course, life happens and things come up, but we recognize that like many students work really hard to meet that deadline, and we also set that deadline so that we're best able to interview everyone and move forward with admissions and actually have our class start for June 1st and have everybody have plenty of time to like meet with their advisor and get things going before the time off that the IRT has in the summer. Dan, I probably did mean February 15th. Did I say April? I may have said April, because April 15th is a deadline that that exists for students making decisions about their packages, and that is on my brain. So if I misspoke, yeah, okay, yes, I definitely meant February 15th, because that comes before March 1st, and that's the application deadline for the IRT. For my friend who says they can't hear me, I am sorry to hear that, but I don't know if I can help you troubleshoot that. It might be an issue on your end. So the good news is this will be recorded and you can watch it retroactively at another time. Okay. This is just a review of the components of the IRT application, all the different tabs that you would see. And so this is a good outline of what you need to submit to complete it. You get your basic information about the kind of applicant you are, your personal background and demographic info, the information about the program you are pursuing, information about your previous educational experience and degrees, discussion or questions about your graduate school plans and the career you want to have after, and a place to upload your resume or CV and transcripts, a place to input recommender information, either arts and sciences essays or education essays, depending on the field you're pursuing, an acknowledgement that everything you've submitted is true to your knowledge, and then the submit button. And just as a refresher, as you go through the application and complete each one of these sections or tabs or pages, you should see a little green check mark in your application portal confirming that that page is complete as you hit save at the bottom of each section. So you should be able to keep track of what you've completed and revisit, log out, save your progress, and come back, and everything should still be there. All right, you've seen this slide before if you've been in one of these webinars already. Excuse me. These are the steps for submitting an application. So a requirement of all of our applicants is that you attend an info session. By this, we are referring to the generic IRT informational session that talks about the program offering and the benefits you receive and the scope of our program. So these demystifying webinars are not part of that info session requirement. So you would want to go to the IRT website and watch the actual generic overview or overall IRT informational session to meet that requirement. Then you submit your completed application online by March 1st. Again, here are the components of the application: resume, CV, transcripts, essays, the actual application itself, of course, and then 3 recommendations. And then the final part of the admissions process is participating in a 30-minute virtual interview that we will host either on Zoom or Skype or Google Meet or another virtual conferencing platform that works for both parties. Okay, so next steps in terms of what happens after March 1st. Everyone who submits a completed application by March 1st will be invited to interview. So we interview every single applicant who applies successfully. Those interviews are usually completed by early April, like the first week in April. And then we're able to start actually meeting as an admissions committee and having conversations about applicants and making evaluation decisions. Of course, we have to also read everyone's application. So that takes pretty much all of April and May to go through that process. By the end of May, we start notifying students of our admissions decisions. We have some orientation materials that are sent your way, including a syllabus for the program, information about the GRE prep that is available to you through your IRT participation, a timeline of when you expect to hear from your IRT advisors, and a matriculation contract that you sign in return. And then in June, the program starts. So as I was referencing earlier, we always aim for a June 1st start date for engagement with our new cohort. We have a whole host of like virtual events that happen in June. So all cohort meetings, orientation webinars, pre-application webinars, cohort, social hours, alumni panels, etc. And you also meet both of your IRT advisors in June, or are introduced to them in June. This is a document that you'll see a lot, either on the website or once you're actually admitted in IRT. It's our general timeline for the program. So you may have seen this if you participated in or watched our general info session. It just gives you a breakdown of the IRT seasons. So we split up our program into 4 primary seasons of engagement: orientations and admissions in May, summer pre-application advising in June through August, fall pre-application advising in September through November, and then post-application advising December through April. Pre and post application is pivoting on the December 1st deadline, which we uphold our scholars to submitting all of their graduate school applications by. And that's all she wrote. So this is a very short, very brief, very broad, summative webinar, just reiterating some of the major themes and highlights from the last 5 webinars in this series. And now I welcome your questions, thoughts, reactions, ruminations, etc.
Wait, I have a question about the recommendation letters. So when I was on the application, like you can only see it after, you can only see who submitted a recommendation letter after you've applied, right?
So what do you mean by after you've applied? Do you mean after you've submitted a completed application?
Yes, that's what I mean.
Yeah, no, I think you're able to see the progress of your recommenders submitting their recommendations throughout, but I'm like blanking on what it actually looks like inside the application because I don't get to like get into that view all too often. I think from like your applicant portal, like when you log in, you have like a dashboard or like a generic like profile, and I believe on that front page it breaks it down. There's like a few sections, and one of the sections is recommendations, and it should display whether they've been submitted or not. I'm reminded that we have some screenshots in the Demystifying IRT's admissions process webinar that discusses recommendations. So if you went to the YouTube channel and typed in IRT Demystifying, webinars, and then looked for the one that specifically talks about recommendations, there are some screenshots of what those views look like and where you're able to see that progress. So I think you're able to do it throughout.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, cheers. Sorry that wasn't like a perfectly crystal clear, like straight answer to like, oh, just go here. But thank you for your grace. Any other thoughts, reactions, questions, things that people are worried about in the application or anxious about?
Honestly, for the like one of the essay questions, I think the first one is very confusing. So like what exactly do you mean by like theories or like the canon? I think that those parts of the question are confusing me.
Totally. You're not the first to ask about this, so you're in good company, right? Like feel good that you're not the only person who's like, can I get some clarity about what a canonical text is and what that means and what you're looking for? So a canonical text or piece of scholarship is just something that is like widely considered foundational or representative of a field. And so a good example of this would be like Karl Marx or W.E.B. Du Bois being considered canonical for sociology, right? Like if you're a sociologist, if you take a sociology class, if you engage with sociological theories or frameworks, you're probably going to reference or know or discuss Marx or Du Bois in some context. Or if you take a Soc 101 class, you're probably going to talk about Marx or Du Bois at some point in that like introductory Soc course. So canonical just means foundational, like acclaimed, revered, infamous, or famous, depending on what the scholar and what the theory is. And then in terms of like critical theory, I mean, I think this can be, it can get a little like, we can really get into the weeds here. So like, it may be better to like do a deeper conversation on this offline. Like, I'm happy to like connect with you if you want more clarity. But theories are just like frameworks or patterns or like commonly accepted ideas about like that fall within a particular discipline or framework. I'm trying to think of like a good example of this off the top of my head. Like what are some like common critical theories within like a particular discipline? But of course I'm freezing up with all the pressure of doing this live. So let me backtrack and say, to answer the IRT essay question, what we're really asking you for is to identify some scholarship from the field that you are aspiring to pursue that has influenced your understanding of that field or influenced your understanding of social justice issues or influenced the work that you are proposing to do within your discipline. So does that help as like an initial response?
Yeah, because I think I was just confused on like if I was supposed to be very specific, like with the theoretical framework. And yeah, that really helps. So thank you very much.
Cool. Yeah. Definitely don't need to like pick like one theory and then like do like some sort of deep analysis or something like that. We're not looking for anything too serious. It's more just, you know, talk about a scholar, a text, a idea, you know, that like really influence the way you're thinking about the work you want to do or the field that you're entering into. That's really like at the heart of what those essay questions are asking. And it's, I'll reiterate this from the essays webinar, you know, we intentionally ask these questions because these are the kinds of things you will be expected to be thinking about or articulating for your graduate school applications. So many scholars, when they're applying to PhDs and, you know, humanities and arts and sciences, will get asked questions like, who are some of the scholars that you're, you know, reading in right now, or well, what are some of the foundational frameworks that you want to build upon in your future research? You know, that's a question that you're going to want to be able to address and respond to. And so we're kind of intentionally getting you to think about these things now so that when you're working with IRT and when you're working with your SOP advisor, you've already put some thought into this. We can go back to those essays and say, well, who did you write about and what were you thinking about? in March. Let's use that as a starting point for what to think about for your statement of purpose, for your PhD application, that kind of thing. Yes, Dan, the texts it's absolutely appropriate for text to be intersectional or transdisciplinary, cross-disciplinary. Interdisciplinary is the word. That's actually a real word that we use. So yeah, totally appropriate to have text that could fall into multiple different disciplines. We're definitely not going to over scrutinize like a person's choice of canonical, or we're not going to like overly hold you up to like a really high bar of analysis in these annotated text questions. We're really just looking for your ability to like read a text, summarize it to us, succinctly, and then also articulate a takeaway. So what text are you referencing? What is it about? Like, what does the text say just generally? And like, what impact did that have on you as a thinker, as a scholar, as a practitioner? That's really at the heart of what that essay question is asking you to do. So it's not meant to be overly burdensome. It's truly just meant for you to be able to say like, yeah, I read a thing, I understood it. I can reiterate it to, an unknown audience, and then I can describe what I took away from it and how it's influenced the way that I think about the work.
I have another question actually. When it comes to the interviews, will it be like based on the essay or just like our applications? Like what will the interview process be like?
Totally. Again, I will just shamelessly pitch that we did a whole webinar in this series just dedicated to interviews, and it's worth you watching that recording on YouTube. Happy to still respond today. So the interview is independent from the application. Your interviewer will be someone from the IRT office, but not necessarily someone who sits on the admissions committee, which means that your interviewer would not necessarily have read your application before carrying out your interview. So there's not like a dependent, like you submit your app and then you are interviewed based on your application. The interview is its own free existing like set of questions that every single person gets asked no matter what they turn in. So it's the same 10 questions for all applicants. And what the purpose of the interview is to try to get a little bit of like personality and passion and preparedness, like a sense of your personality, passion, and preparedness that just doesn't come through on paper. And no, I did not mean to do all of that alliteration. That just worked out that way. Those were all P's. But yeah, so the interview is just like an opportunity for us to like interact with you and get a sense of like who you are and why you want to do this work in a way that just doesn't come through on, a written application or the essay questions. The essay questions are truly meant to be inspiring you to think about the things that your statement of purpose for your graduate school applications is going to ask you to write about. So that is very intentional. Like IRT's interview essay questions are basically like your first draft of your SOP, whereas the interview will ask you about like time management skills and like why you're applying to grad school and why you're applying to IRT, and to articulate your future work and your professional career goals for after graduate school. So it's a little bit more interpersonal. It's a little bit more not informal, but about like creating like a personal connection. Whereas the essays are like, we want you to think about these particular things because you're going to be asked to regurgitate them for a statement of purpose in the fall. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you very much.
You're totally welcome. And forgive me for the rambling. If I'm like reiterating something and you're like, Brittany, I get it, just thanks. And I'll shut up.
I have a question about the essays. So specifically the education essays, question number 4, which is, please submit a brief essay describing 3 texts within your discipline.
Mhm.
I graduated last year with a sociology degree, and I'm trying to get a master's in educational policy specifically. So within your discipline is making me a little nervous because obviously most of the courses that I've taken have been sociology. Didn't really take a course that was specific in education studies. So I don't know, like I have text that I know that I want to use, but I don't know if the within your discipline means like the discipline that I graduated with or the one that I'm hoping to go into.
It's a great question. So our intention is that it's your graduate school discipline. That can definitely be something we can clarify in the application if that we don't say that explicitly about your future or intended disciplines. Let me just make a note about that right now. Essays number 4. Clarity around future discipline. Okay, so thank you for that little bit of feedback. So that is our intention. Now, we've definitely worked with scholars who have a different undergraduate degree than what they're pursuing in graduate school. It's not an uncommon experience for a student to start their undergraduate career with one thing in mind, or maybe with nothing in mind, because you're a first gen student, who didn't have the same like foresight that someone whose like parents or family had gone to college would have. So I think you can take this, you could approach this in either direction. Like you could provide sociological texts and then in your annotations, describe the ways that they have inspired you to pursue education. So like, oh, here's a foundational text from sociology that really influenced the way I think about education systems and the role that educational spaces play in society. So like I had this sociological framework, but it's like made me realize that education policy and influencing educational structures is actually where I want to have an impact. So you could take that approach where you're like acknowledging that this text is not a foundational text within education, it's within sociology, but here's the way it influenced my decision to pursue education. So you could take that approach, that would be totally appropriate. Or you could take the approach of like, here's a text or an article or a scholar that I've been familiar with in education, maybe saying like, I didn't like write a paper on this guy or anything, but like I'm familiar with these ideas and these concepts and they've inspired me or they like are interesting to me and I want to interrogate them further. And like, here's why, here's like the focus that I want to have in graduate school. And here's the ways that this text or these ideas could, further influence my future directions. I think either would be appropriate. And again, the essay questions are not meant to be like overly punitive. Like we're not really like nitpicking people's responses and saying that like, well, this guy is not canonical within K through 12 teaching or education policy. So like this person is out. We're not that critical. It's truly just meant to assess your ability to read something, be able to summarize what you've read, and then describe the influence it's had on your future directions or your current positionality. Does that help?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Perfect. You're welcome. We've only got about 4 weeks till the application is due. In case anyone wasn't already having like anxiety today, let me just add that to your to your brain space. Other thoughts, questions, reactions, reflections? I know this was a very brief webinar, but hopefully at this point, you know where to find information if you want it and you haven't gotten it, or I put my contact info in the chat once already. It's on the IRT website. You can absolutely reach out to me directly or my colleague Leslie or the IRT at Andover email address. And if things come up as you're digging into this over the next few weeks, you can absolutely be in touch.
Oh, I have another question. Do we have to prove that we actually like attended an info session on the application or no? Because I was gonna attend it, I just didn't know how.
Yeah, sure. Prove is a tough word. It's really just honor system. Like what we do is we will ask you in the application, I'm pretty sure. And then when we do your interview, the first question the interviewer is going to ask you is if you've attended an info session or if you've watched the recording. So the recording is available on the website and you could literally just play it like in your headphones while you're doing dishes. And like that would count as attending an info session. The reason we have that requirement is just to, what do I want to say, ensure that students have a foundational understanding of what IRT is. Because believe it or not, we do get applicants sometimes who are, talking about pursuing a PhD in computer science, or maybe computer science isn't the best example. How about a PhD in physics? And it's like, well, if you attended an info session, you would know that we don't support STEM fields broadly, and we can't support applicants to STEM fields broadly. And you would not have submitted this application if you attended an info session and that was clear to you. So it's truly just to have this sort of foundational mutual understanding about what you're actually, do you know what you're applying for, right? Do you know what you're getting in for? Do you understand that there are going to be high demand times in the IRT cycle, and the fall months leading up to the December 1st deadline for submitting your applications is very time demanding and labor intensive in terms of weekly meetings with an SOP advisor and meeting with your IRT advisor, drafting materials, sending in transcripts, sending GRE scores, getting recommenders on board, communicating with recommenders that you're applying to 7 to 12 graduate programs. It's just do you have a basic understanding of what you're getting yourself into? And that's why we have that requirement. So honor system is the short answer. I'm excited for these top-notch applications that are going to be coming through. Oh, absolutely not. No pressure. And by top notch, all I mean is, average above average, right? To go back to our evaluation scale, I don't necessarily mean 5s across the board, but I do mean passion, no typos, clarity, right? Intentionality. That's really what I mean by top notch. Not that you're going to rank a 5 in every category, but that it's going to be clear that you want this and you know what you're getting into, and you're articulating your goals really with a lot of focus, and your match with IRT with a lot of clarity. No, don't be nervous. The worst thing you can do is not submit an application. Truly, even if you think it's trash, even if you're damn, I'm embarrassed to turn these essays in. We receive 300 applications on average every cycle, and we no, it's very timely. Yeah, so I'll just give a little background about our admissions, our typical admission stuff. So people ask about our acceptance rate all the time. We get about 300 applications, maybe 250 to 300. And in the best years, we are able to admit 150 students. We're currently a little bit short-staffed in the office, and we are transitioning with some new roles. So our capacity is a little bit reduced than it normally is. So this year we're looking to admit a cohort more around 90 students, which is pretty low for the last maybe 3 or 4 years. We've tried to admit higher cohorts. We went from 120, which was our average probably 5 years ago. The last few years we've amped that up to about 150. We're a little bit short-staffed right now, and pandemic challenges and transition in the office. So we're aiming to admit about 90. But also because we didn't actually travel this year to recruit on campuses, which is normally what we do. We have a recruitment person who goes to a college campus and hosts an informational session and meets with students live. Because we didn't do that, our application numbers are actually a little lower than they've typically been. So we have less started applications now than we would normally have at this point in the process. So I think we're going to probably have less completed applications than we normally have. I don't know if we're going to reach that 300 mark this year. We might be looking more at 200, 150 for completed apps, which is keeping us in the range of a 40%-ish acceptance rate. Somewhere around 40% is what we're able to admit. The caveat to that is almost everyone who applies is qualified. And if we had more capacity and more funding and more staff and more infrastructure, we would be able to admit almost every single person who submits an application. And that's where it becomes really hard to make decisions. And that's why most IRT scholars are in that average to above average range and not in that excellent range, because the folks who are in the excellent range often have other support systems and other mentors and other guides and other fee waiver, organizations that will give them fee waivers or support for getting GRE prep. And so when we have to have, an acceptance rate of about 40%, we're looking to like support those like neediest, most qualified, passionate students who like wouldn't have a pathway to graduate school otherwise, typically. And this varies from year to year. I think every cohort is unique. Every admission cycle is unique. Different students have different needs. So it always looks a little different. Tatiana is right, for sure. If you did not participate in all 6 of these IRT demystifying webinars, it would go a long way for your nerves, I think, to listen to the other 5. Leslie, my colleague Leslie, is normally with me, and we've talked through a lot of these questions and fears and anxieties and worries in these other webinars with students, and we provide a lot of insight into what it looks like behind the scenes and logic about why we do things the way we do things. So yeah, definitely think that that is good advice from our veteran participants. Okay, we got another question here. I'm going to read it out loud for the sake of the recording. So for folks watching this retroactively, they get the full benefit. So I have a question about intended area of study. I'm a studio art major currently, and I hope to go into art education or continuing with my art and getting an MFA. Awesome. So I'm not really sure what to put down in the application, meaning do I select it's both an arts and science and an education field, or just one or the other? Especially since I'm a regular art major and not in art education, I'm like curious about where this field falls. So just to answer this question specifically to the IRT application, you can select both for the question of, does your intended field fall within arts and social sciences or education? So there are literally 3 options, like arts, social sciences, education, or both. And that is a question on the application, and so you can choose both. When it comes to the essays and answering the essay questions, I would encourage you to lean into the education side of things. So even if you pursued an MFA in art or painting or whatever your particular vehicle method of artistic expression is, your ultimate goal, it seems, is to work within an educational setting with art as your primary tool for engaging in education. And maybe I'm off base, maybe I'm making too many assumptions. And if that's the case, please correct me. But because your ultimate career goal is to work within an educational setting, I think that is where you want to frame your application. So answer the education essays and lean towards like art education as your field. Perfect. Okay. Yeah. So art education is not really a field that exists too commonly yet. Like if you looked at like just Googled graduate programs in art education, you wouldn't necessarily find one at every single school the way you would find like an MFA more commonly, right? Like it's probably more frequent or more popular to find MFAs. You would probably end up applying to something that we internally refer to as a split list. So when we work with students, a major part of your IRT program is constructing a school list, which is just a list of all the graduate programs that you intend to apply to. And a big part of the summer pre-application advising with IRT is doing your school list research. And so we have like the spreadsheet with all these columns about the different kinds of info you want to know about prospective graduate programs. And so your school list that you would be filling out would probably have a split of MFAs, which are technically in art, right? An art, humanities, social science category, and a split of some maybe like MAT style programs or MEDs, which are leaning towards art education. So MAT is a Master's of Arts in Teaching. Maybe you're not trying to be an art teacher, maybe you're trying to do art therapy, or maybe you're not interested in necessarily being in like a traditional K through 12 school, but doing some sort of like charter school or Montessori school, like art engagement that like, develops, like helps children develop critical thinking skills and that kind of thing. You're probably going to have a blend of MFA programs and education programs that would like allow you to have that kind of career after the fact. And so a big thing when you work with IRT, we spend a lot of time talking about graduate school program fit and how that program matches with your professional goals. Like, what's the end goal here? It's not just to get a degree, it's to have a job and have an impact and, to make a difference within a particular community or a particular realm of education. So I would lean towards the education side of things. I think the education essay questions are going to be more relevant to your professional goals rather than the arts and sciences essay questions. And you will get an opportunity to like elaborate on that in the IRT interview as well. I hope that helps answer your question without too much rambling off the main idea. Awesome. Is anybody like prepared to submit their application anytime soon? Is anyone like, yeah, I wrote my essay, it's all done?
I have everything but my essay done.
That's fairly typical.
I'm almost done. I think I have one more essay left. The first question, because it's tripping me up.
Totally. Okay, all right, a blend. All right, I like that. So that's reassuring for me, as the person who's like about to read all these applications. I'm like, y'all are in good shape. Definitely. Okay, cool. Good stuff. Yeah, I think don't put too much pressure on yourself when it comes to the essays. Like if you're getting stuck or if you're feeling like you just can't, do like answer the questions succinctly, just spend some time free writing, right? Like just do some like pooping out on a page, like just do some like, brainstorming, just stream of consciousness, like whatever comes to mind. I'm just going to write about some stuff. Maybe you start writing about like your grocery list or like, your kid's soccer game or like your dog's vet appointment, and fine. Okay. You're just dumping out everything from your brain and then getting to a point where you can like get to the good stuff of whatever you want to say for any one of the essays. I'm sorry, I got distracted by the chat. Janessa, you're saying if you just put in like, oh yeah, like a one line for each essay, you could submit now. Yeah, okay, that seems legit. Y'all are funny. Yeah, but just if you're getting stuck on the essays, just spend some time free writing and don't put so much pressure on yourself to yeah, right, to come up with something perfect immediately. We're very forgiving here at the IRT. We're very holistic in our approach to reviewing applicants. Everyone, like we said, we interview every applicant. It's the same 10 questions. So even if your essays are kind of and you like submit something that you're not like the most proud of, you're going to get a chance to like save face with us and like kind of reiterate that or explain that in the interview. You're going to get an opportunity to like articulate your goals again, talk about your research again, talk about why you're pursuing graduate school again. So even if the essays are like not your best work, just finish them, get through them, submit them, and then give yourself the chance to like elaborate and really impress the admissions committee and all that in the interview and after the fact. Because the worst thing you can do is not submit something. Like truly that would be a disservice to yourself. If I get an application from someone that's like, well, Brittany said we could just like, take this easy. Like I was in that webinar and she said these essays aren't that important. Like they'll be calling me out. And my executive director will be like, for shame. I'm teasing you, of course. But yeah, I think you've got this. You are probably very brilliant. You're probably very passionate. You probably have a bunch of firsthand experience that informs the work you want to do. lean into that. You know, that's going to come through. We're going to see that. And that's kind of our sweet spot. Like, we really like to specialize in people who like have all the ideas and have all the tenacity and passion and smarts and persistence and grit and desire to make a difference, but just don't necessarily have all the like formal training, or like, you know, maybe they don't have like a support system of people who can like review their essays every week for 3 weeks before they submit the application. Or maybe you're a working parent, or maybe you're you know, been in the field for 10 years and you're returning to school for the first time in a decade. Like, that's kind of where we specialize in those, you know, slightly non-traditional, or maybe slightly is not a good word, non-traditional, historically marginalized, you know, historically unsupported applicants who have so much potential, right? That's where we really pride ourselves in having an impact. So just do it. You're fantastic. We believe in you. We want to see you come through. Other thoughts, questions, reactions? Great. Cheers. Yeah, thanks for showing up every time and being thoughtful and offering advice to your peers and connecting with fellow applicants. Yeah, you're all welcome. You're all super welcome. That's right. Correct. You will all be fine. It's going to be great. I can't wait to work with every one of you. Okay, cheers. So, yep, you know how to reach me. You know how to reach IRT if other things come up. Definitely go back through and watch these webinars in the info session. Feel free to be in touch with other questions. Good luck. Take good care. Stay healthy. Stay safe. Stay sane. Stay whole. And we'll be in touch again in March at the very least. All right, folks.